time for the Property Podcast, where every week tens of thousands of property investors, new and experienced, join together to get news, knowledge and laughs at our expense. With me, Rob Bence.
And me, Rob Dix. Join us every Thursday morning for your weekly dose of property ideas and motivation. Then head over to our website at thepropertypodcast.com to keep the conversation going. Now though, let's get started.
Ho, ho, ho. It's Father Christmas here for episode 40 of the Property Podcast. And with me every week is Rudolph. Or you may know us as Rob Benson, Rob Dix. Good morning.
Oh dear. Oh dear, it gets worse.
That was my best impression.
Have you got your paper hat on?
I have.
And your comedy jumper? Getting in the festive spirit?
And I've got a fake beard on too. No, I haven't really.
I haven't shaved for a while, but it's not quite at Father Christmas levels yet.
I'm getting as grey as Father Christmas, but... Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Property Podcast.
Oh, yeah, we should have said that, shouldn't we? Yeah, the Property Podcast Christmas Special.
Woo!
So, you know, when you sit down to watch your favourite TV show and it's around Christmas time and you get really disappointed because they just do a really lazy clips show of highlights from the year, it's kind of like that. That's what we're going for in this episode. But actually, I'm selling a short because, as always, we've got iTunes reviews, we've got a ton of news, we've got an interesting news story, and we've got a whole bunch of top fives, which is going to be what we're running through. Loads of stuff summing up the year so far. And the resource of the week is our top 5 resources of the week, including a brand new one. So there's actually a ton to pack in. Now I say all that.
You sold us short, Rob. You've sold us short.
I have.
Well, as we've got so much to pack in, let's jump straight into the reason why we're here and why we do what we do, and it's the fantastic reviews. So the first review this week says, mind broadening. The podcast about goals hit a soft spot in my beliefs. Can't explain, just carry on your work.
Deep.
Short, but very sweet and deep. Mark says, always interesting and informative. Found the podcast after first finding the Property Geek podcast. Absolutely excellent listening and great advice. I'm already on my second self-build to rent, but still learning more every show. Thanks. Great work, Mark. Congratulations. And Jay says, the resource of the year. Just about the most brilliant put together podcast I've ever listened to by two very genuine and generous guys. I'm particularly inspired about how self-development concepts and strategies are presented in a completely relevant, realistic and non-cheesy way, and yet remain inspiring. Often not the easiest thing to do. What a resource. Well, thank you, Jay.
Non-cheesy? What have you been listening to?
Yeah, go back to the intro. Yeah. And also, Rob, we've had a message through the website.
Yep, let's play that now.
Hi guys, well what can I say, this is Richard Brown speaking, and I've just listened to this week's Property Podcast over lunch and was quite surprised to find that I was actually featured on it, so very, very humbled indeed to stumble across that. And I'm also very impressed to see that perhaps on this one small issue I've out-geeked the Property Geek as well. So that was brilliant. Just want to say you're doing a great job, guys. I have only recently come across the podcast. I normally read most of my online material, so listening to it is actually a new media for me to explore, and really enjoying the subject. So congratulations. Really enjoyed the show. Keep it going. You're doing a really good thing, and as I say, completely humbled to find that my own feature has appeared on your podcast. So hopefully lots of people get to hear about that too, and I can't really claim to be that original. I'm sure I stumbled upon this or stole it from various people along the way, but good luck anyway. Cheers. Bye.
Richard, thank you so much. I'm really glad that you're honoured to be on the show rather than annoyed that we're ripping you off so often. It's been great to have your tips, and sneak preview, Richard is going to be on the next series of the Property Geek podcast, which is coming back in January. So for far more of his insights, stay tuned for that.
I really look forward to that one, Rob. I think it'll be a good episode.
It will. All right, so lots to talk about. The first thing we really have to say is the Property Hub launch party.
Woohoo! That's 2 woohoos so far. It must be Christmas.
So the Property Hub, as you may know, is launching on the 9th of January. And so we thought it was only fitting to have a launch party, which we are having in London on the 11th of January. So if you're on our mailing list, you'll know about this already. But if not, it's going to be 11th of January in King's Cross. Again, just like our last meetup. And so the idea is just, well, people have been saying to us, when are you going to have the next meetup? And we've never had a good answer. So I thought, well, what better time to do the next meetup than to celebrate the launch of the Property Hub? If you want to know more about that and to register to come along, the thing to do is to go over to thepropertypodcast.com/launch party. So that's propertypodcast.com/launch party. And that is where you can register to come along completely free, of course, but we just need to get an idea of how many people are coming. So please, we'd love to see you there.
It's going to be a great event. It's a mash-up of the two, so the launch party and a meetup. So it should be fantastic. The meetup, the one and only meetup we've done was brilliant. Loads of people turned up. So I'm hoping we get just as many people along this time. So if you can make it on the 11th to King's Cross, we'd love to see you.
We would. And the rest of England, we've not forgotten you. There will be a North of England meetup at some point, which people keep mentioning as well. The other thing we have to talk about the Property Hub is we've got our social media presences set up, which I think we mentioned last week, but we've actually got the URLs now. If you are sitting in front of a computer now, go type this in. If you want to follow us on Twitter, it's twitter.com/propertyhubuk. And on Facebook, it's facebook.com/thepropertyhub. If you're not sitting in front of a computer right now, just head over to the show notes for episode number 40, the Christmas special. You'll find the links there. Please like us, follow us, do whatever you do, because we're going to be sharing lots of news and all sorts of cool stuff on there.
It's great. There's lots already on there, so head over now if you haven't already. Okay, Rob. Well, the news this week, you can actually take credit for. It must be Christmas. You've given me a week off on the news story.
Yeah, so this is a story I spotted during the week, and it is that Zoopla has announced that it's kicking all the aggregators off its platform. So what they mean by aggregators is, there are those services where it's like for 50 quid, they'll put your listing on Rightmove, Zoopla and all the others.
Yeah, sure.
They don't provide any kind of agency service. It's just like they'll put the listing up there. So you as a private landlord can have a presence on those platforms, which is really useful. And all the inquiries just come straight through to you. There's been a lot of rumblings about this because agents pay a lot of money to be on these platforms, and they think it's unfair that people can essentially bypass it. And so Zoopla have taken action, and they've said that they're going to be kicking off anyone who basically does just pure listings like that. So to be on the platform, you need to actually be offering an agency service. So you actually prepare the property details, you act as an intermediary, handle inquiries, all that kind of thing. This is kind of interesting because it's possibly removing an option for private landlords, so it might be bad news in that respect. It's just an interesting one because if they've done that, then if Rightmove follows suit, then that's a lot of people who are going to have their business model threatened, and there are going to be a lot of landlords who use one of these services and then suddenly have to find another way of doing their marketing. So I thought it was an interesting story. It's kind of not the end of the world in itself, but it's possibly the start of something interesting that's going to develop through next year.
I think you've got us a cracker for this Christmas special, Rob. It's a really good story. Although it's just one network, Zoopla, you're right. Really, there's two that dominate the space, Zoopla and Rightmove. If Rightmove follows suit, there's plenty of businesses that'll be shutting down. And letting agents will be celebrating because they would have seen a lot of business taken away. The flip side, though, is those landlords who do like to handle things themselves are going to be hurt by this one and may be forced into using a letting agent.
Exactly. So we will see how that develops, and maybe there'll be future updates we can give next year. But for now, let's move on to our topic of the week. This is going to be a good one, actually. As it's Christmas special, it's going to be top fives is what we're talking about. We're going to be talking about our top 5 books, episodes of the podcast, things we've learned, resources of the weekend, a little bit more. Let's get started, shall we?
Let's do it. I'm excited.
The first top 5 we're going to do is the top 5 books we've read. So we've mentioned quite a few books in the course of the last 40 episodes. It's always popular, and I've had a few people who've said that they've read a lot of them on our recommendations. So I don't know if we've mentioned all of these on the podcast, but let's get started. So my first nomination is Antifragile by Nassim Nicholas Taleb. It's very long, it's very philosophical, but there's a lot in there that you can pull out. And the basic thesis is lots of things are fragile, they're easily breakable. Like, so example, if you're a business whose entire business model is letting people advertise on Zoopla, you're fragile if Zoopla suddenly says you can't do that anymore. Antifragile is something that gets stronger with shocks. So it's a kind of an interesting idea to try to apply to property investment. So it's like, rather than being fragile, so like if the interest rate goes up 2%, then I'm screwed. It's like, how can you actually get stronger as a result of shocks like that? It's something where I'm not quite sure what the direct learning is, but there are so many interesting ideas in there. I think that's well worth the read if you're into a bit of kind of philosophizing in that way. Is that even a word? I don't know. It is now.
It is now. It is now. And Rob, we seem to like long books because my nomination is The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich. I'm actually going to recommend you listen to this as an audio book because I know podcast listeners, you tend to drift towards audio. And this audio book is 54 hours long. 54-hour audio book. So over 2 days worth of listening. So it's absolutely fascinating, though. It's the history of the Second World War, or the Third Reich in particular. It takes you from the birth of Hitler right through to the end of the Second World War. And the detail, the level of research is incredibly impressive. I'm a bit of a history buff. I really like my history podcasts and books. But this really is one of the best I've ever, well, in this case, listened to. It's absolutely fantastic. I'm only about halfway through when I go for a walk or a run. This is what I'm listening to at the moment. My podcasts are really falling behind because I've got so many hours to get through. But trust me, the commitment of the author to this project is absolutely incredible. So a great book. If you've got even an inkling sort of interest in history, definitely go and download that one because it's absolutely fantastic.
I'll give that a try next time I'm on hold to NPower. 54 hours might just about get me through until they pick up the phone. While we're talking about history, also, I listened to this as an audiobook as well. The biography of Benjamin Franklin by Walter Isaacson. That was 27 hours, I think. And again, I got totally behind on my podcast as a result of that one. No real particular relevance to actually, no, that's a lie. There is some relevance to property in there because in his will, he set up a foundation by taking a couple of his properties and the rental income from that went into a foundation, which even 200 years later, with all the compound interest and everything else, is funding loads of projects in Philadelphia. So there's a lesson in compound interest and all the rest of it and the power of investing for the long term. But even aside from that, he just had a fascinating life and he was just a really, really interesting guy. So I'd recommend that one if you ever get to the end of the Third Reich.
Can I recommend, because I've not read the Benjamin Franklin biography, but I have read the autobiography, obviously the one he's put together. It's incomplete. He didn't finish it before he died, but it's really good as well. It's not that long, well worth a read. He does talk about property. You're right. He actually references somebody who was going to buy property in Philadelphia, but said, oh no, the property will crash. The property market will go down. And 5 years later, he paid something like double what he should, what he could have 5 years ago. And he always believed in owning, property. I'd say that's a good one to accompany it. It's shorter, and I think the biography will probably fill in a lot of the gaps. So I need to listen to that one. But the autobiography is on my bookshelf and one I've read and also very good. That's not in the top 5, but that's just a little sneaky bonus one.
Oh, a little bonus. I like it. All right. Well, my next one is The Power of Habit, which is a book that we have definitely mentioned on the podcast. That ties in really nicely to goal settings. It's about how if you can form habits and behaviors become automatic, then it means you don't need any willpower. So if you get into that habit of going for a run for every morning, it's something you do and you don't need to convince yourself to do it anymore. There's practical lessons in there along those lines, but there's also just loads of really fascinating examples of how companies and other people are kind of tapping into this and using it in all kinds of different ways, and how so much more of our behavior is habitual than we realize. We like to think that everything we do is totally intentional and under our control, but a lot of the time it isn't. So that's a really great book. And The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, I think it is. We'll link to all these in the show notes, of course.
And our final book is Get Up to Speed with Online Marketing. And of course, it featured the property podcast, so it was always going to get in the top 5. It's a great book. It's actually on my desk as we speak now. And I've finished it. It's fantastic. It's by John Reed. So if you're interested in online marketing, social media marketing, things like that, then that's a great book to read. But John has kindly put a blog together, which we'll link to in the show notes, which covers the case study that's in the book. So if you'd like to have a sneak peek of our mention in there, then we'll link to that in the show notes so you can have a read yourself.
Very cool. All right, let's move on then to top 5 episodes of the Property Podcast. So these are our 5 favorites. I suppose if you're relatively new to the podcast, this could be a good place to start. If you want to go back and check out some of the old ones, but you don't have the staying power to do all 40 in a row, what's wrong with you? Then just pick out these 5 as your starting point.
Okay, so the first one is probably one that came to a shock to us that's been so popular. Is inflation your worst enemy or your best friend? Now, inflation, you immediately think snore, zzz, and, turn off, not listen to that one. The amount of feedback we've had off that episode has been phenomenal. Lots of people say it's one of the best episodes we've done and one of the episodes they've learned the most from. I was really pleased with that because I talk about inflation a lot in my strategy meetings at RMP. So I was really delighted that that one was so well received.
Yeah, I think you can take the credit for that one because you had some really great analogies in there, which I think simplified the whole thing. But yeah, really popular episode. Another popular one is episode number 26. That was what we call 20 more property investments to avoid. So I think in a previous episode, we'd done 5 property investments to avoid or something like that. And then it just kept coming up with more and more and more. So in that episode, we just rattled through 20 more things that you shouldn't be investing in for all sorts of different reasons. And so that ties into due diligence. There are some things which are just an outright bad idea and you know it, but there are others where you might make a mistake. You might not realize it's next door to a meat processing factory or something like that. So that really talks about the importance of doing your research and getting into investments that you're going to be happy with for the long term.
Great. Okay. So the next episode that's made our top 5 is episode 19. And that's our first property investments. And that's where Rob and I took you through the journey of our first investments, how we started, why we did what we did, what we've learned from those experiences. That again was another episode that was really well received. A lot of people gave us feedback to say they really enjoyed that. It was nice to see how we got into property and how our journeys began. So episode 19, if you're interested, that was our first property investments and what we learned from them.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that was a fun one. Another one which was fun and terrifying at the same time. This is one of my favourites. Episode number 17, the Property Podcast Live Listener Questions episode. This is my favourite because people kept listening and there was an episode 18 afterwards. So this was one which we did completely live online. We recorded the show with a live online audience. People submitted some questions in advance. We had people asking questions live as well. And so we were completely unedited, which is a really scary thing, but it went really well. People enjoyed it. And then we subsequently did another one. So that was a lot of fun. And we'll undoubtedly do another listener questions episode at some point soon as well.
Absolutely. Episode 4 makes the 5th entry. And episode 4 was Landlord versus Investor. Another episode dear to our hearts because I think that was the first episode, Rob, where we realized we're actually half good at this because the first 3 were a bit ropey if you go back and listen, if you want to amuse yourselves. But episode 4, we found our mojo and we really had a good time. But also combined with that, it was a really informative episode. And we took sides like last week's episode where it was North versus South. We had landlord versus investor. And Rob took the landlord side. I took the investor side. And like last week, I whooped his bum.
Well, I don't know about that. You'll have to go all the way back to episode 4 to check whether that's true or not. But that is a dichotomy that we've used, the whole landlord-investor thing, in subsequent episodes as well. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. I've not been back to listen to episodes 1, 2, and 3, and nor do I intend to. So the next top 5 we're going to do is the top 5 things that the podcast has taught us. So this ties in really nicely to what we've just been talking about, because the first thing that we've learned is the importance of listening to feedback. So some of the most popular episodes we've done have been episodes suggested by listeners. So we're always saying, if there's anything you want to hear about, let us know. It's great when people write in to say that they want to hear about certain things. So we had lots of requests for an episode about tax, for example. And so we didn't think we were qualified to talk about the ins and outs of it. So we went away and found an expert who helped us put that episode together, and we've got really good feedback on it. And there've been others like that as well. And if we hadn't done that, we would have probably missed out topics completely, or we'd just be kind of completely blind guessing what people wanted to hear about. And so our most popular episodes have been ones that have been suggested by the listeners, which makes sense. So yeah, listening to feedback is a really important thing we've learned from all this.
Okay. Next on our list of top 5 things the podcast has taught us is education should be free. The amount of feedback and gratitude and thanks we get for just producing all this content, not charging for it, putting it out there for free is fantastic. A lot of people, I think, are questioning why we do it, but, we love this. This is a passion project for us. We absolutely love the podcast. We say it, we're not lying. It is the most enjoyable part of our working weeks. We love putting the podcasts together. So the education, the podcast will always be free. You know, I've had listeners tell us we should start charging for the podcast. That will never happen. Education, property education should be free. And that's why we'll continue to make the vast majority of what we put out there absolutely free. And that's not going to change.
Indeed. Okay, the third thing we've learned is to take chances. So I think it's fair to say that all the best things we've done so far, we had no idea if they were going to work. And we just did it anyway. I think the live episode was the first one where we just had no clue if it was going to work. And it was great. Then we had our meetup where we just thought, well, we're both in London for once. Let's say that we're going to be in a particular place and see if a few people turn up. And about 50 odd people showed up. And then the property hub is the next thing. So we don't know yet if that's going to be a success, but we just kind of had this hunch after our meetup that there was a demand for people to talk to each other. We thought that it would be better to connect everyone who listens to the podcast rather than us kind of being the node in the middle that's holding everything back. We had our pre-launch offer, which sold out really, really quickly. We've got hundreds and hundreds of people on the list to be notified when it launches. And so it looks like that might pay off as well. But the thing that all of these things have got in common was that we didn't have a clue and they could have all fallen completely flat. But by kind of putting ourselves out there and saying, hey, we're going to do this, if we'd waited until we were certain, none of those things would still have happened. So taking chances has been really important. I'm sure at some point we're going to do things that don't work, but that's okay. You've just got to kind of give it a go and see what happens.
Our chocolate saucepan business might not take off, but we'll see. Okay, next on the list of lessons that the podcast has taught us is your network is your net worth. Okay, your network is your net worth. The podcast has taught us really that the networking side of what we do, reaching out to people to help with the podcast, to contribute to it, has really, really enriched our business lives and personal lives as well. The power, the benefit of networking is absolutely fantastic. And this links really back up to the other things Rob's just mentioned, the meetups and the hub. And they're two places where networking can take place as well. So that's why we're really passionate about it, because we've seen firsthand the benefits of it. And we've seen other podcast listeners see the benefits of it as well, where we've been able to put two people together where their interests would match. Make sure 2014, if you've not been working on your network, make sure you do. Make sure you strive to attend some of these meetups we put on, or at the very least get online on the hub and just contribute and ask questions and talk to people and make connections, because networking costs little to no money to do, but can add masses of value to your professional and personal lives.
That's true, and that's all well and good, Rob. But I think we can all agree that the most important thing we've learned from the podcast so far is that people really don't like cheesy intros, do they?
Yeah, especially cheesy intros from American guys. Unbelievable.
Poor old Rick. That didn't go so well. We were probably at a cheese factor 9 with our intro. We're now possibly down to a cheese factor 5 or 6 or so. You know, again, links back to listening to feedback. The people spoke, Rick got axed. That's how it goes.
It broke our hearts, but we did it for you, dear listener. We did it for you. Rob, next one. Top 5 things we hope our listeners have learned. We tend to bang on about a few things more than others, but there's reasons behind it. The first one is set goals. Have we mentioned that before on the podcast, Rob, about goals?
Not sure, but maybe we should talk about it in detail now.
Setting goals. Episode 15 is our goal setting episode, one you should definitely go back and listen to. And in conjunction with that, listen to episode 25, creating your property dreamline. 2 episodes you should absolutely go away and listen to. Setting goals is so important. Only yesterday, I had a young guy contact me who wants to be a property investor. He's got a bit of money, and he basically threw 5 to 6 different scenarios at me. Should I do this? Should I do that? Should I do this? Should I do that? We were going around in circles for a few minutes. I was giving him generic advice on each one. It was really difficult to help him. And then obviously the penny dropped quite quickly and I realized what was wrong. And I said, you haven't set goals. What do you want? And he didn't know. I said, so if you don't know what you want in a year's time, 3 years' time, 5 years' time, how can you decide what to do now? By setting those goals, it'll quickly rule things in and out and allow you to have some structure to your plans. He was amazed because he thought by contacting me, the conversation was going to be all about property, but actually I sent him away to refocus on his goals and what he should be doing. Goals are so important in property, in your personal lives and business lives. They can change your life. So the first one on our list, but would be probably number 1 if we were putting them in order, would be set goals.
And we're going to be talking about goals again next week. Sneak preview. We'll tell you more about that later. The second thing that we hope you've learned is research. So we talk about due diligence a lot. We've spoken about it from a lot of different angles. We've talked about the actual research process. We've talked about specific investments to avoid. We've spoken about tips for doing your research more efficiently online using the tools available. We've talked about research a lot because it's important, and you don't want to fall into analysis paralysis where all you do is research, and that's something that everyone is susceptible to. But research in conjunction with really solid goals, you can't go far wrong with that.
Absolutely. Next, build a team. We did an episode on this as well about building your team around you and how important it is. Use experts. This could also be called as well. Have a fantastic solicitor in your team. Have a fantastic mortgage broker. If you need somebody to help you with the property journey or sourcing property, have that person or company in your team. If you plan to be hands-off, make sure you've got a fantastic letting agent. All these people, all these professionals will make your life as a property investor so much easier. It can make the difference between, profit and loss to fantastic success to nightmares. By having the right people around you, it can make a big, big difference to your property journey. I would say though, link back to the point before, research. Just because someone tells you that they're great doesn't mean they are. So research them. Okay.
The fourth thing that we hope you've learnt is to think long term. I feel like my stock answer to everything is it's like, but in the long run, it'll all sort itself out. But I think it's kind of true. It's like people sort of talk about what's going to happen with interest rates over the next 6 months, or what happens if you have a void for a month or something like that. And it's like, always think long term. You should be looking at an investment as of being multiple years. There's this idea of the property cycle where you'll have booms and busts along the way, but property beats inflation in the long run and always has done. So if you're making sure that you're taking a long-term perspective and you're not overextending yourself, then anything that goes wrong along the way, you'll be able to ride out. And that is really, really important, because you never want to be in the position where you've kind of been a bit short-sighted, something catches you out and you're forced to sell. When you're in a position where you're forced to do something, that you're never going to come out of it well. So taking a long-term perspective on property, taking it as like a get-rich-slow scheme rather than a get-rich-quick scheme is really, really important.
Absolutely. And although we've mentioned it in the last top fives, our last on the list is connect with people, because it is so important. So we hope you've learned from the podcast that we've done where we talk about networking and how important it is, that you should start to do this yourself if you're not already. And if you are, fantastic. Well done. Connecting with people is so important. If you're, a little nervous about getting out to meet people, start with the hub, in January. Get on there. It's easy. Just type a few words and tell people about yourself and inquire about other people's interests. And before you know it, you'll start connecting with people. But come along to the meetups as well. They're really friendly. Our meetups are not intimidating at all. They're really laid back with just lots of friendly podcast listeners. No horrible, I know it all types of people allowed. It's just nice people. And that's what the hub will be as well. So our last lesson that we hope you've learned this year from the Property Podcast is connect with people.
Well, so that they are our top fives. If you've got any that you want to add, if you've got any books you've read, or, or if you want to blow smoke a little bit and sort of tell us about one of our favorite episodes or something that you've learnt that we haven't mentioned, then get over to the show notes. It's at thepropertypodcast.com, episode number 40, and let us know what you think. You'll find all the links in there as well. But next, our resource of the week, as ever, to end the show. And our resource of the week is going to be this is kind of meta. Our top 5 resources of the week is our resource of the week.
Yeah, so we've got 4 you've heard before, but we really think you should have another look at if you're not using already, and 1 brand new one. So the first is Trello. And Rob, we use this every single day with the Property Podcast, with other projects we work on. I use it in my business RMP. I know Rob uses it nonstop as well. Trello is free. It's absolutely fantastic. And if you're not using it as a minimum as a to-do list, then you're crazy. But even if you are using it just as a to-do list, you're still crazy, because there's loads more you can do with it. It's absolutely brilliant.
It is. It's so simple. It's hard to describe what it is that makes it so good. You just have to give it a go. And if you've ever done battle with kind of software for organizing your life and that kind of thing before, because there's just too much to do, I think Trello could be for you. The second one, which we've also talked about in the past, is Evernote. And I've actually had quite a few emails from people who've said, I've started using Evernote since you recommended it. I didn't realize how good it was. And yeah, Evernote is great. There's kind of more options with this. So the Evernote is for kind of keeping track of everything in your life. You can use it for taking notes, for keeping bookmarks, for everything like that. You can organize everything really nicely. You can search it really easily, and you can get it on all your devices as well. For property, there are so many applications for this. Like I even sort of scan all my documents into it, so I don't have to keep paper all over the place. It's just a brilliant tool. There's a little bit of a learning curve. You can start using it really easily, but if you want to really get the most out of it, there's always more you can discover. But it's worth getting into. And I know a lot of people have been really enjoying it since we've had it as our resource of the week back in the early days. So check that out as well. That's Evernote.
You should definitely do a blog, Rob, on Evernote and property, how you can use the two.
That's so true.
I think that'd be a good blog. There you go. Put you on the spot.
Yep, stealing that. Let's do it.
Okay, great. Next on our list is Buffer. Okay, we've mentioned Buffer before, but many of you may have not taken it up, but it's really, really good. Again, it's free. There is a paid version, but it doesn't cost a lot if you are really hardcore. But Buffer, again, is an app we both use. Now, Rob and I will both come across a lot of content on a weekly basis, but it may be 10 o'clock at night or 6 o'clock in the morning when we can put it on our social networks, but probably not a lot of people are going to pick it up then because they have lives and aren't reading sad blogs like us two at crazy times of the day. So what you can do is you can buffer the content, the interesting content you find. What buffer means is it just, or does, I should say, is it'll send out the content at peak times. So when most of your network are online, it will buffer that content, distribute it across the day at the best times. So if tonight I was reading a few articles, read 4 or 5 and 2 or 3 of them, I thought, this is great, I really want to share it. I can upload them all into Buffer then and there. And the next day, it will buffer the content so the people in my network can benefit from it too. Really simple, but really effective tool. One you should check out.
And another tool, I think if you've used one of these, it's probably most likely that this is the one you've used already. Google Docs. It's an obvious one. If you use Gmail, you've probably come across it because it's so tightly linked in. But Google Docs is worth mentioning because we use it to do everything to do with the property podcast because it's just so great for having documents online that anyone can edit. You can have 2 people updating a document at the same time without losing track of which the latest version is. You can share things really easily. And it works for presentations, spreadsheets, like word processing, anything. And it's completely free, of course, and you can get it across all your devices. Google Docs, you're probably familiar with already, but if not, check it out. It just makes our life so much easier.
It does. So that's 4 resources, 4 apps that we use non-stop. But there's one that we picked up recently, and this is a new one for you. So this is the new resource, but it's in our 5 because we've started using it recently, and it's a fantastic tool, and it's allowing us to use email less and less. And I'm sure, listener, you're like most of us, that email consumes a lot of your time. And sometimes emails can be a bit formal. You have to put a lot of effort into them. And as soon as you send one, you get another one back. The cure is HipChat. Okay, HipChat. It's free, up to 5 users. And basically, it's just a private online chat forum online. Sounds really simple. It is, but it's incredibly effective. Rob and I have been using it a lot recently. We were sending emails over to each other, probably a dozen a day, lots of emails. We don't email each other anymore. We just use HipChat. Whenever there's an idea, there's something that the other one needs to know, just briefly, we can just do a quick line, hit return, and it's there. And then the opposite end, you can get notifications when they arrive. You can edit those notifications so they suit your preferences, but it's really, really effective. And if you've got a small team or a small network of up to 5 people, it's free. But beyond that, it's only $2 a user, I think, Rob. It's really, really cheap.
Yeah, and you'd be amazed what a difference it makes as well. You might think that like dashing off a quick one-line email doesn't take much time. I don't know. There's just something about it, and sort of seeing a big pile of emails in your inbox that you have to deal with as well. It's very different when you've just kind of got this ongoing chat. It's so quick to send a message. Receiving a message is just so much less. It means you can kind of have that kind of conversation with your team without having to go into your inbox and see a million other things at the same time. It's made such a difference to us. So obviously you're still going to need email. From a property point of view, you're not going to start using HipChat with your solicitor or anything like that. But if there's someone who you correspond with all the time, or if you've got a small team that you have to communicate with every day, if you start putting it into HipChat instead of email, I think you'll find that it makes a big difference to your productivity.
Super. Okay. So that's our Christmas special of top 5s. But next week, We're not going to wish you Happy New Year yet, because next week we've got a pre-New Year special, and it's called Should You Ignore Your Goals During 2014? What? We just banged on about goals, Rob, and now we're going to ignore them?
Well, you're going to have to listen to find out. So yeah, just because it's Boxing Day doesn't mean there's not going to be a property podcast. Rather than having the turkey hangover, we're going to show you how you can really sort of be putting in the work while everyone else is resting and make 2014 your best year yet. Do listen to that next week. And of course, sign up for the Property Hub launch party if you can make it on the 11th of January. You need to sign up to find out where we're going to be holding it. It's going to be in King's Cross. We don't have the exact venue at the time of recording, so the only way to find out is to get over to the propertypodcast.com/launch party, register there, and we'll be seeing you there.
Get over there now, the propertypodcast.com launch party. Make sure you do it, because don't let Christmas get in the way, because you don't want to be one of those people who, the 12th of January go, oh, I wish I'd gone. Because we've had a lot of those emails, so make sure you're not one of those, because it's going to be a great, great event. But that just leaves us to say thank you so much for listening to the podcast this year. I know we've got one more before the year's out, but we really appreciate it. And we wish you a very happy Christmas, and don't eat too much turkey because you've got a podcast on Boxing Day.
It's true. Merry Christmas, everyone.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks for listening to the Property Podcast. Make sure you join our mailing list at thepropertypodcast.com.
And remember, we love 5-star reviews. Rob even loves them more than air miles.